Well, I'm going to say this side here is done. About all I'm going to do with it. It looks a little bit better. The weld's a little rough, but by the time it gets stuck in the dirt a few times, you'll never know the difference. They'll all be smooth. It's time to work on these side cutters now. Just these two teeth. These two are nice and straight. I'm not going to mess with those. They're in a good position. But these two outer ones weren't far enough to the outside edge. So I'm going to try to get lined up here. And the way I usually do this, since these items here wear, you can't measure off of them. There'll be a good mark here along this back side. This cutting edge should be straight. If you measure inside here, there's little wear on this, so you can get a good center line through here. And if you extend your center line out past your bucket, you can measure outside of your teeth. This is a 18-inch bucket, but like I say, that it wouldn't hurt if the teeth were at 19, half inch on each side. That would actually allow this bucket to move easier through the dirt. Anytime you're digging, dirt rolls around the edges, and when these are narrower than back here, it binds up, so it burns more fuel, takes more horsepower, and really makes a bad ditch if you're not really careful. So we're going to remedy that, hopefully. Okay, let me kind of show you what I got right now. I got everything cleaned up. I got I like to use brand new teeth when I'm doing this alignment, because with worn teeth, you never know if they're, they could be wore off a little bit funny and you might not notice. Plus, this gives you the length of a new tooth, and they all can vary a little bit, but if you got two of the same brand, you should be in better shape than if you got two different kinds. But what I have here is a handy dandy little magnet holding this end of this ruler on the center line of the bucket up here. I also have a clamp down here. This gives me the center line of the bucket, this edge. And what I will do now is, from that point, this is supposed to be an 18-inch bucket, and what I'm shooting for out here to corners is a 1/4 inch past an 18-inch bucket. It should be 18 here, but here it should be a little wider. That gives you some digging clearance. The more I've learned about digging, the more I've learned that you need a little bit of room to work. Your bucket needs a little extra room. Some soils will shrink or not so much cave in on you, but when you dig the center out, it'll slough off a little bit. Sometimes the dirt moves a little bit after you dig a trench in it. But see, right now I'm sitting at about, I got about 9 1/4 on this side, which would be right on the money. And then if we measure this away, I got about 9 1/16. So this tooth here, well, it moved pretty easy there. That's getting closer. But what I'm shooting for is, I always like to have a center line. That way I know my teeth are about the same distance from center. I never want to just go off on one side and measure over, because you never know how much is worn off of this side. The best way to measure a bucket that I've found is from the inside here. It hardly ever wears inside. So you can take a measurement in here, also up toward the top of the bucket, like up here to the top of these cutting edges. This is a good reference point. You just kind of got to watch and look for things that will help you out. This cutting edge blade stops right here. It gives you a good reference point, so you can actually take this angle finder and I can actually line up this tooth with that, and that gives me a reference that I can flip over here and I'll see how close I am here. The problem I run into on these outside teeth every time is it seems like you never can get them exactly the same. It's pretty tough. But what I ended up with, I'm going to pull this one. What I ended up with is both of them, I ended up grinding a little bit out of the inside so that it fits up here a little tighter to the cutting edge on the side. The reason for that is I like to keep the tooth a little straighter. That gives you more wear surface down here before you get as wide or narrower than your bucket. What you can do at that point is you can take this tooth, put it on that side and that one over here, vice versa. You can get a little bit more life out of them that way. But if these are too narrow to begin with, what I see happen is they quit wearing here and it starts wearing here, and this is not what you want. You want all your wear out here on the tips. This back here will give you I don't quite understand how it works, but this determines your width of your ditch. This out here, it can be, I've even actually used these wider teeth on the outside edge, and in certain soil it will still only cut as wide as this cutting edge. This isn't real critical if you're just digging ditches, but if you're digging footings, if you're digging something that they're putting, let's say they're putting 16 inches of concrete and they need 2 inches of insulation, and their inspectors will measure and see if they've got clearance for the rebar. So if they're an inch under, they'll say, hey, this ain't right. So it makes my job easier if everything here is square and true. It makes everything work a lot better. When I first started digging, I didn't know anything about this. I've never talked to anybody that's given me any advice on it. In fact, I had some teeth put on at the dealer one time, and they actually just put them on here straight like this, and they look great. They was all perfectly straight, but the problem is when I started digging, when you get this deep, your ditch is fine. But when you start digging deeper than that, if your dirt's really hard, it takes a whole lot of horsepower to push this plus that through the dirt. If your tips out here are wider, it takes a whole lot less horsepower, less fuel, saves money. So some of those things you just got to pick up along the way. You learn and you try to figure out what's best, and you got to be smarter than the dirt. Is kind of what I'm learning. Anyhow, I'm gonna get these lined up and do some more welding here. A few things I've been told about this is it's a good idea to preheat these cutting edges before you weld them. I've seen them crack right next to the weld. This, I'm not sure what kind of steel this is, but it's a type of steel that if you don't preheat it, there's enough hardness in it that it will crack. So what I normally do, you can go to your local welding supply, you can find these, it's called a temple stick. This one's a 425 degree stick. Once you get started welding, after you get it preheated, preheat's just minor. Once you start welding, this whole bucket will be more than 400 degrees. This stick is set to melt at 425, so when I preheat, if it melts when I scratch across there, it's 425 degrees. And that gives me a good indicator if it's hot enough. It's probably a good idea to preheat these too. I have put these on and had them break right after I put them on, and I've often wondered if that isn't because of the preheat. Everything, you know, when it's hot, it swells up and then it shrinks back down when it's cold. So these teeth take a beating. I mean, these outside ones especially. So any amount of preheat you can do on this is going to be beneficial in my opinion. I wouldn't go overboard and, you know, just heat them up too much, but you know, I was told 400 degrees is enough. this one done. 2 passes with 7018 preheated. The preheat will help your welds look a lot better. 7018 likes it. Preheat a little bit, you'll have less undercut, but especially on this hardened steel, I think you'll have a better chance of not breaking a tooth off or cracking this cutting edge. This tooth is actually acting as a corner in this bucket, so it's important to get a really good weld on both sides. This tooth is holding these 2 pieces together basically. I'm going to turn the bucket up here now and get a weld on the bottom side of it. outside teeth welded on. And straight as I could get them. Now it's time to take the bucket off. We're going to do some rebuilding on these sides. We're going to build this taper back up to where these are square instead of rounded